Hey, Rachel.
Hey, Ryan.
How are you?
Okay.
Yeah, you're good?
Yeah.
Well, that's great to hear. Very nonchalant this time round, aren't we? We're
settling in.
We're settling in. We're settling in to talk about Star Trek Discovery with our show Yum Yum Trek. We're the YumYumPodcast because, of course, we are.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think even we need to explain at this point.
We couldn't be anything else after the beautiful historic line of Yum Yum.
It's right up there with Rosebud in Citizen Kane. You know, at the start of Citizen Kane, we don't understand what that is supposed to mean. Some audience members still probably don't even know what the Rosebud is a reference to. And that's kind of like what Yum Yum is in Star Trek Discovery. But, Rachel, we're not talking about that specific moment in Star Trek Discovery, are we? This show is us talking about our rewatch experience of Star Trek Discovery, one episode at a time.
Mm-hmm.
We've done 3
in chronological order.
In release date order. Chronological order with this show could go all over the place. Season 2 would be a nightmare. We'd have to stop it at points to rewatch other bits.
I meant chronological by air date.
You meant by our timeline. Yeah. So we are doing, this is the 4th episode. Of course, this being our rewatch, we're talking spoilery stuff because we have seen the show before we watched it when it aired. We have a mixed feeling about it. We've gone through this before, but in case you're new, we are tossing up on how we feel about the show as a whole. There are lots of things we hate about it, lots of things that we liked about it, lots of things that are leaving us perplexed, and things that we want filling in that could be filled in on the rewatch. This episode, we are covering episode 4, season 1 of Star Trek Discovery, The Butcher's Knife Cares Not for the Lamb's Cry, which is possibly one of the most pretentious titles in the whole series. But that just may be me.
Whole series of Discovery or the whole existence of Star Trek?
I'll leave that vague
Okay.
for the people to decide. Email us at YumYumPod for what you think the answer is.
Okay. Do you want to go description first or guess the rating?
Do you want to guess the rating? I didn't have a guess before. I just looked at it, so I can't guess.
I think it was in the 7s.
I don't think any in the first season go above the 7s. I don't think they go into the 8s.
No.
Maybe
I think
later
the
ones.
last episode might have been the highest of the season. So I'm gonna guess 7.2.
Close, 7.1. So the plot synopsis, according to the IMDb for this episode, is with tensions and stakes high as Starfleet continues in their efforts to end the war with the Klingons, Burnham begins to settle into her new position aboard the USS Discovery. That was all one sentence, by the way.
We're not here to judge their grammar.
No, we're not. It was a long sentence. Is that an accurate description? Yes, it is. That is an accurate description of the plot.
I wouldn't say that it's accurate because it is misleading.
It describes the events. Tensions are high, stakes are high. Starfleet continues in their efforts to end the war with the Klingons. Burnham begins to settle into a new position. That's kind of the plot. But according to Netflix,
Netflix's one is more correct in my opinion.
It's something. It describes it more as if this is Vok's story, and this is about him, and this is his episode. And I guess that's an accurate thing, because, spoiler alert, this is the last time we see Vok as an actual character in the show. He becomes a different character now, but that's but we don't know that
until later. But, I think a part of that is just because in the description, the details for Vok's one is first.
True.
I feel like if those sentences were flipped, you wouldn't feel the same.
I wouldn't feel
way.
the same, no, but it makes it sound like what the B story is the A story. But that doesn't matter. We're not we're not reviewing the synopses of the episodes. Rachel, what did you think of this episode? What did you think of it? How do you feel?
I don't know. I don't think I liked it.
You don't think? What about it makes you feel iffy? Like, if you know deep down you kind of didn't like it, what about it is holding you back? Instead of me asking you, what about this did you hate? What about it's holding you back from a pure answer?
It's not that it's... Okay. It's not that I think that I liked it and I'm unsure. I'm unsure if I hated it.
Oh, so you know that you didn't like it.
I know that I didn't like it, but I don't know if throughout this discussion I'm going to discover a new level of hatred.
That's going to keep happening, isn't it?
Yeah, every time.
Can't wait for when we do Star Trek Picard. And I'm like, Picard? Every time we say it.
Please, no.
So,
do not punish me with that.
My thoughts on this episode are mixed. I didn't... It's a nothing episode to me. Although the episode progresses major plot elements that will continue through the season, character things as well, and I just felt nothing.
It's still weaving the thread of the show. We're introduced to a very important plot point in the form of the tardigrade.
Yes, and the Klingons too, and that's a beginning. We're introducing the fact that they're actually going to do something.
Okay, well, do you want to go Klingons or tardigrade?
Well,
first?
before we even get to that stuff,
ooh,
I want to give. And I don't know if you have any notes for these, but I noticed a lot of interesting. I won't say necessarily good or bad, but interesting foreshadowings of things to come in the series. I don't know if you noticed any. I noticed quite a few, and this is the joy of a rewatch. These are things that you won't notice the first time round unless you had some prior fan theories or knowledge. When I watch a series like this, I just kind of let it wash over me when it's initially watching. Of course, I'll think a few things. Like I wondered on the first watch, is Lorca just a corrupt Starfleet captain, or is he like a Captain Jellicoe, or is he a Mirrorverse thing? And well, we got the answer eventually.
The only one that really stood out to me was him eating like the octopus or the calamari.
See, that was the one I thought you wouldn't have got it because that was a bit more subtle. I was expecting you to get the other big ones.
It was because he made a big reaction, and
I thought that was genuinely a good foreshadowing rewatch thing because we discover later, that in the Mirrorverse they eat Saru's people.
Kelpians.
And here he is joyfully eating a squid that's very similar to what they look like on
the ganglia specifically is a delicacy.
Yeah.
So he's obviously
and
looking for something that's similar,
and Lorca's loving it. He's just like,
yeah.
He's really relishing it up.
He refuses to stop eating when he gets a call from a superior, and he's just like, sorry.
It's in regulations to eat, he says. That was a line.
No, it was forgive the disregard of regulations.
Oh yeah, forgive the disregard of regulations.
Like, forgive me for not doing the right thing, but this is damn good.
It is damn good.
Admiral Cornwell?
I didn't realize you were eating, Captain.
Excuse breach of protocol.
They have, for the Klingon storyline, some foreshadowing about L'Rell, the female Klingon, about how she does not
deceitful?
No. She does not want the call of leadership. She does not want to be in charge of a clan. And then later we find that she's in charge of the whole race. And she's very reluctant about that. Yeah. And we see that reluctance actually pay off.
Yeah.
Because her season 2 thing is the struggle with being the face of power, when in this she even says she likes working behind the face of power. She likes being in the background.
Yeah.
So I actually found that quite interesting on this watch, because L'Rell is not a character I have ever cared for. No. I forgot who she was when she turns back up in the season itself. Later on,
when I have so much trouble remembering her name. I'm like, she's the female
Klingon, the burn-faced Klingon later. So I found that an interesting little dynamic there that they are foreshadowing into with that. And Stamets laments the fact that he cannot talk with his spores, his mushrooms, which is something that will eventually kind of happens where he talks to Hugh through mushrooms later.
Yeah, like he does get the ability to communicate with the network.
Yeah. I just thought those were some interesting things. I don't necessarily think all of them were great because I guess the thing with the foreshadowing is it's the payoff as well. With Lorca, that was a nice piece of foreshadowing because when that thing does happen in the show, it's creepy and off-putting and darkly funny.
Yeah.
So when you go back and watch it and you see it's been pre-established early on, like you said, you were giggling about it and Lorca's looking for an equivalent and it's like you're having to giggle because it's quite a funny thing. Laurel and the struggle for power, I give it a bonus point because it makes me go, oh, they did put some effort in with Laurel as a character, but doesn't necessarily help me at the moment at this point with how I feel about her as a character as a whole in the show later. And the spore drive thing, it's there.
It's nice.
It's there.
I like the way that they're setting up Tilly a little bit more balanced than she's not just comic relief or just spouting wisdom because she's older than her years.
It's in her eyes.
It's in her
There's no eyes in this episode to point to, so I have to point to hers.
There was a zooming out of something.
Oh, we'll get to that.
That was the first shot.
A butthole, practically. No. What was they zooming out of? I've forgotten.
It was
right, the uniform.
Replicator.
What the hell was
creating
that?
the uniform, and it's just like, ooh, there's like a universe in the microsphere of the uniform as the replicator. And it's like, no,
it's just a fancy special effect.
You just made some really cool graphic engines.
Yeah.
For all of the galaxies, and you were like, let's reuse them.
It was weird that was the introduction. I think sometimes, because Star Trek Discovery has such a budget to it and is allowed to have the luxury of great special effects, great costumes, great lighting, whatever, production that we talked about before, because they have the tools to do great things, that means that they feel like they have to do extravagant things. And an opening like that, it's funny, kind of, but it makes you go like, oh, okay, that was a lot of effort for what is just a woman replicating her new uniform.
Yeah.
You look smart. It's a lot less scary than your convict suit. Like a clean slate, right?
Let's talk about the least interesting part of this episode, the Klingons. I know that might get some people in a tizzy. There are people who like the new Klingons. I do not, and I will say they are still boring to me. How did you feel about the Klingons this episode? Rachel Sliwinski, how did you feel about the Klingons, Vok and Laurel and Kol?
Is the question itself that boring to you that you need to make it in a sing-songy voice?
Yes.
Okay.
Because I know the answer's boring. Because the answer's going to be yes, I found them boring, Ryan.
Well, I'll try and do a compliment sandwich, but I think it might be an open-faced sandwich.
So compliment sandwich is insult, compliment, insult?
I like that they're staying consistent with them speaking Klingon. And then it's the subtitles. I like that. I like that. No, I need to do the bad thing. But I don't think I can just stop at one insult.
Let's just not even bother with the compliment sandwich.
I want to try because
Rachel, there's not enough ingredients to make a compliment sandwich because the Klingons are fucking boring and dull. I cannot believe that these Klingons have just been sitting on their hands for 6 months.
No, they managed to get everything that they need except one thing.
Yeah, because they could have got that from much earlier, but he had his stupid pride that made his people starve to death, and for a stronger, more powerful leader to come in and corral these people into an actual...
He's not a natural leader.
No, and he sucks. Voke sucks. Voke is terrible.
He's not a natural leader, but he's trying to do his best, and he is devout, and that stays true.
Whoop-dee-doo-dah-day. He's devout to the point of useless.
I'm dumpster diving for positive things for this sandwich, okay?
Okay, look. What I mean is, I do understand
I
that...
something to be good, right? I want something to
You
be
don't
good.
have to be as passionate. Okay, here's the thing that I think was a detriment to
it's
the
just
Klingons.
Too easy to shit on the Klingons as well.
In this thing, it threw me the first time I watched it, and it throws me even to this day.
Mm-hmm.
This Klingon ship is a ship that has a form of technology that is very useful to the Klingons.
Yes, clicking.
Hence, another Klingon eventually does rock up and wants the ship. If this Klingon race is now unified because of Tumav, why would they have left that ship there the whole time?
I think
Because
they haven't. They haven't been properly unified. Because that does come later.
Okay.
It's like that they're
because Kroll
it's like
unifies them, right, with
Yeah.
the cloaking technology. Okay.
all. Well, yeah, he starts that, and then threatening the homeworld with a bomb comes later.
Well, that's not Kroll. That's
No, that's not
L'Rell.
Cole, but like that's part of the unification.
Is
So I
a
think
doomsday machine, yeah.
what it is that all of the houses are fighting the war and are thus unified, but they aren't unified as an empire and a collective force.
As
in
an
the
army.
way
As a military
that-
force, they're not unified.
that Tumar what he wants, like the remain Klingon and
Yeah. They've
the
adopted
Klingons
that.
are working together. I think they're adopting the varnish and the platitudes without
Doing
actually
it properly.
enacting the principles behind those.
Okay, I think that's a problem that should have been explained in this episode because we haven't seen these Klingons in 2 episodes. Like, it's been a single episode in between, so we haven't seen them since 2 episodes ago. You find out it's been 6 months, and they've just been sitting there starving to death like idiots. And because of their devout leader, man, who's a terrible leader, but has a smart right-hand woman, they've been just sitting there refusing to actually engage and do anything because of their devout values.
People have
which are...
died from their hunger. That's a line that Vok has.
Oh, I know. And I think it just makes the Klingons pathetic. And like I said, if these Klingons want to win the war and they are shown as a military force, they are shown
Why
as...
leave a weapon behind?
Why
Yes.
we leave technology that would help you win the war behind?
Yeah.
The fact that
I
it
think
took
it's
Cole
like-
6 months
It's
to rock up.
respect to the that house will take care of themselves, because
Here's a question.
I
Do
al-
they know that they're still in the binary star system? Do they still know that? Because
I
they
don't
all
know.
left before. But
Yeah,
do
they
they know
all fucked
that
off.
they are still... That ship's still there, or do they think that they made it out? Maybe that's something.
maybe that's why they go back. But I'm always like, why? Like, Volk is a dumb leader and an inexperienced leader. But
Yes.
why doesn't he say, "Hey Cole, I'll do you a trade. I'll do you a trade."
He's not that smart.
Yeah, and I'm always like that's not that smart. Like,
How did
she
he-
could have counseled him for that. Be
How
like,
did he
send
not-
out a beacon.
Yeah.
Do that. Like, you don't have to disgrace the house, but you are advantageous towards us because we get the crystal, we get our mobility back,
Yeah, yeah.
and
they need...
we want to help unify them. So, like, giving them something in...
It's a pull. It's a stretch. It feels like a stretching act you're doing right there with them. I think one of the issues
It's
with
always a stretching act when we're trying to find something
the Klingons.
that it could be better if they did this.
How did Vok keep this crew of Klingons
I
like stable for 6 months
I think
with the
it's
fact that he has
just-
not done anything?
It's just because they were stranded.
They're stranded, and I guess they've been distracted by the fact that they have picked up debris and stuff. But I
They're
don't know. I
trying
just
to get things together.
I find it
and-
so pathetic that we are supposed to find the Klingons at all an intimidating force in this series when the Klingons that we are knowing to be an adversarial force, the only ones we've known to be adversarial force in these 4 episodes, are this pathetic and this useless. It really was that one leader that they had. Tukuvimov was the only reason that these guys were at all intimidating, and he died.
Yeah.
Vok is useless. There's a moment at the end in which Cole tells him off for being a pathetic leader, for being useless, and all I wrote was, he's right. He's right. Vok is a terrible leader.
I wrote that line down. He's as useless as he is ugly.
And Laurel, I don't know how she could stand Vok doing nothing other than, she's in love with him. But that's something that we don't get to actually see properly. Just because the actress makes some goo eyes every now and then, that doesn't count as characterization of a whole character to explain why she would let him be so incompetent. If she's so competent and she was one who wanted to be the leader or should have been, how could she, and if she's so devout to Tukuvimov's beliefs, how would she let Vok just sit there and let these fucking guys just do nothing and starve to death and die? She's the one that actually wants to do the thing.
Their relationship is born out of the trauma.
It's born off screen.
Yeah, and also the joy of eating Giorgio's skull together.
Oh my god, wasn't that fucking hilarious? And then the show wants you to, like, do a tonal somersault act of, the death of Giorgio, how sad, and then, the Klingons fucking ate her, and then, we miss Giorgio through holograms. Can I just say, I don't want to discuss this as fully as we could, because this one issue, but it will be something I want to touch upon right now, and it will be something we'll be discussing as the show goes on. Laurel's plan to take down Starfleet and restore their legacy in the Klingon Empire so that everyone will fear and respect the name of Vok and Laurel is so perplexing,
stupid, ridiculous.
I wouldn't even say all those things.
Unrealistic.
I would say this.
Nearly impossible.
The audience is supposed to get a bait and switch with the Ash Tyler reveal later on.
Yeah.
That's fine. A bait and switch is fine. But the issue...
I do think that the dialogue that she has at the end of the episode is a nice way to set that up.
I disagree.
It's ham-fisted.
I disagree.
But it's there.
What I was just going to say was I completely disagree. Because the dialogue, I remember this at the time, and I remember this still feeling this today. The dialogue that she says makes it sound like they are actually going to do something. To do something important and groundbreaking and something that will cripple everyone involved. Their actual plan is just to send in an imposter to do nothing. That's and the idea that you will bring the legacy of Tukuvimov. I do not even believe that if they were that devout to Tukuvimov to the point in which they would starve to death for 6 months, the idea that he would physically change himself into a human being is so ludicrous to me.
The whole thing of remain Klingon.
Remain Klingon, but you have to... But Rachel has to sacrifice everything.
Yeah.
Either way, that's something that will be something we talk about as the show goes on, but the plot setup of that, I remember thinking, I can't wait to see what these Klingons are going to get up to. I remember when I first watched it, I actually was like, okay, these two have an interesting dynamic that could be explored further. And then, we got what we got, and it wasn't satisfying to us, at least. So let's talk about the more interesting stuff in the episode itself, the actual plot line of the Starship Discovery. It was fine. I thought there was a lot of moving components, and maybe this is just what I've said in the past, and maybe this is just me wanting... This isn't even me wanting what Star Trek used to be. This is me wanting a little bit more in tune with some other prestigious television. It feels like they're spinning so many plates he is a character, he is a character, he is a storyline, he is a characteristic, he is foreshadowing, he is an action sequence, he is this. I just kind of wish that they would tighten it up and focus in on the individual story of the episode a little more so. Do you know what I'm saying when I'm referring?
Yeah.
Like, I want to enjoy this episode, and I think, like I said about the previous one, there's an interesting sci-fi Star Trek war story in here, but it's just spinning so many plates. We got to know what the tardigrade's all about. We got to care about Lorca being a warmongering. Oh no, this colony's under attack from the Klingons. We got to get the spore drive working. We've got to worry about the Klingons plotting their thing. And oh no, we got Cole. See, it's setting up so many things.
Yeah, but it seems to think that a lot of those, like, it confuses individual things with umbrellas. Because it's just like, they're A story and their B story.
C story, D story, A story. Yeah.
Like, they think that, like, those umbrellas of, like, them dealing with the spore drive and, like, them needing to get to this place. Like, that's but two things under Discovery. Like, it's the Klingons trying to fix their ship and Discovery trying to get there in time.
Yes.
That's what they think.
The A and
The
B
A and B storyline, but under each of those stories is at least two different things. Because the Klingons one is the most simple.
It's very simple.
Because it's like they're trying to get the thing, and the other dude comes on board and
Screws
shits
it up, yeah. And then they plan.
And they are separate.
They are separate.
They are separate, which I always forget because I always am like, oh, well, maybe Vox sent out a signal to get him to come. No, he just rocks up and they don't explain it. And then on Discovery, we have the transmissions and getting to know Lorca.
Yes.
We have Michael investigating the tardigrade.
Got Landry.
We've got Landry joining that.
Yeah.
And then Stamets working on the spore drive independently. And then we also have the will.
We also, yeah, it's
So
a
is
lot.
that 4?
Did you also state the Klingons attacking the base? And they have to get there in time? That's like the central thrust.
Yeah, I mentioned that with
it's-
like Lorca, getting to know Lorca and the base. So kind of like 5.
Rachel and I are not...
Those are 5 plot threads instead of one story.
No, Rachel and I are not unfamiliar with that kind of thing happening. We watch modern television. We've watched other Star Treks where you have many storylines. We've watched Babylon 5, in which an episode will have 7 storylines going on at the same time. We've watched Game of Thrones. We know that, but there's an art form in itself of how one structures multiple things going on. Things that are only for this episode, things that are setting up things for future episodes, things paying off things from other episodes and so forth, as well as moments of storylines of levity and storylines of padding. This episode just did not successfully enough for us. I wouldn't say it's a complete failure because I understood all of what was happening.
Yeah.
I just wasn't as invested as I could have been if it was a tighter script or a tighter structure on the stories.
And a lot of that has to do with the lack of thematic cohesion between those plot lines. Because we talked about that a lot when we were doing our recent rewatch of Babylon 5.
Yeah.
Because all of these things are going on, but they're braided together to create a thematic through line for that episode, as well as across seasons and the whole series.
Yeah.
So it feels like it's woven.
Yeah. I agree.
But this doesn't have that connection because it's just like, okay, Lorca is fighting a war.
Yes.
That is what he's doing. That's his primary goal. Like, his thematic exploration is like the nature of war and what is evil.
Yeah.
And then Michael's is curiosity.
Oh, you think? You think they said the word curious and curiosity 17 fucking million times in this episode?
Remember,
I almost
she's like-
OD'd from the word curiosity.
And then Stamets is science. So like, I guess the idea could be that, like, all of these characters are exploring their primary motivation.
And Landry?
because
And
there's-
Landry? What about Landry? Hers is follow orders blindly to the
Yeah,
letter.
she's scared of Lorca.
Do you think she's scared of Lorca, Landry? Do you? I don't.
I think she is...
I think she's
she
indoctrinated into
She doesn't
him.
want to disappoint him.
Yes.
And I think that, like, a part of that is
loves
she's
him.
just like, he's my captain. They have a sexual relationship.
Or at least a
accord-
chemistry.
according to us.
Well, they definitely give off sex
Yeah, they
vibes.
give off sex vibes.
And we know he fucks.
So what material is in a claw that can shred the hull of a ship? What's a hide made of that can withstand the firepower of a phaser set to kill? I need you to find out.
Yeah, Landry is such a weird character because she's a chief of security. She's a mean, tough lady.
I thought she died earlier. Like, it's only episode 4, and I thought she died in the second episode.
No, because you mean the previous episode? The second episode was still the pilot.
No. I thought she died the first episode she was on screen.
Oh, yeah,
so
yeah,
when
yeah.
she appeared, I was like, oh, she's
Landry's-
here already. She's gonna die really soon.
Landry's a weird character because she's that kind of character that we meet an evil version of her in this universe, and then in the alternative universe, she's the exact same. So
Yeah,
it
which
makes you
doesn't follow
question
at all.
makes you question either the writer's continuity sensibilities, how persuasive of a figure Lorca is, which
Yes.
he isn't enough because every single other character in the crew and on the show
Yeah.
do not trust him, do not
No.
respect him, do not believe in him in the way she does.
No.
So you think the alternative, like our universe version of her, would be the most skeptical. Say if in his universe she's the right hand woman to him, other than Michael, like she's his right hand. Wouldn't she be one of the most wary of him by that logic
Yeah,
in this
I
universe?
remember being so disappointed that she wasn't from the Mirrorverse too, because it
would have been cool.
Would have been cool.
Because she had this kind of relationship with him where it was sexual, but also they had this relationship in which it was like, we both know things that nobody else knows.
Yeah.
Kind of vibes. Or she could be like Garrick, in which Garrick in the Mirror universe is basically the same, except for he's a
Yeah.
little bit more evil because he's still got to be a spy.
Yeah.
But basically, he's the same dude. He's just a little, like, you cranked up on the knob on Scary just 2 notches.
Like, it's not all the way up to 11.
No.
Doesn't need to go that far.
Tomorrow morning, she will be gone.
Gone.
She will be gone. Please don't make me use some foolish euphemism.
Okay, so should we talk about how Landry dies?
I don't even know why
Is that
she's-
worth discussing?
It feels really rushed in this rewatch of it because I honestly don't know why they couldn't have kept her around a little longer other than the shock value. The way she dies
like-
feels so weirdly rushed because the mission that they need to do does not require the tardigrade, but she is acting like this is something we need right this second, although they have another priority. Do you know what I'm what I'm saying by that? Like she's treating it like this is the be all and end all, and I'm gonna fucking kill myself to get this done. But that's not the actual emergency mission that she has to be prioritizing.
They don't know that the tardigrade is linked to the spore drive. They are just trying to weaponize it in some fashion because they see the damage that it caused and its ability to kill Klingons.
Yeah, and they don't know how they're going to use that, and they don't know and or would use that for this battle right this second. And also, it's a space battle. They know it's going to be a battle with ships. How's the tardigrade going to be useful? Especially at this point, they don't know it can survive in outer space.
No, they didn't.
It just is, we had to kill her off because we have other pieces to move into place. It was funny.
Yep.
I found it hilarious when she died because it was so pig-headed. I think that's a part of the charm of her dying is such a red shirt move of
Yeah.
like blind
Really
ignorance into death.
Yeah.
I'll poke the thing with my finger and then I died.
Yeah. And it's sheer fucking hubris that
It's-
she has.
It's no
The-
Tasha Yar.
No.
At least Tasha Yar's death, although pointless, I understood why she was trying to do something.
Enough. We have people who need attention. We won't hurt you, but we must help them.
This episode does subvert that writer's trick of Michael being the best, although we did find out, much to my chagrin of making fun of the fact that she's the best at everything, we did find out that she did study quantum mechanics, so that explains why she's the best at everything other than xenoanthropology. But she does have a character flaw this episode. Did you spot it? Did you spot her character flaw this episode? Rachel, come on, it was a very big scene. Did you spot her character flaw this episode? Her tragedy, her mistake, her wrongdoing? Rachel's not... She betrayed Saru's trust again. Saru thought that she genuinely wanted to talk to him and treat him like an actual individual, but she just manipulated his biology to prove a science point
She's
to clarify her
genuinely-
hypothesis.
She is genuinely so much more upset that she betrayed the trust of the tardigrade. Because we'll get to the naming of the tardigrade later.
Ripper.
Ah.
Looks like Ripper.
She cares way more about that than she does about upsetting Saru. Which,
Well, because the tardigrade's not a dick. I mean, yeah, sure, it's killed so many innocent people, but the tardigrade hasn't given her sass.
I loved sassy Saru in that elevator scene.
This episode had a lot of
I
sass.
always love sassy Saru.
I kind
But
of
that-
wish that I
like
could
that-
like sassy Saru. I think
That
the problem
whole
is,
segment was just slap on the sass.
well, he had my favorite line in the episode. If you want to hear it, if it's not your favorite line,
Yeah.
is it yours as
No.
well? Okay, it is. My ganglia remain unconvinced.
Yeah.
That was a great line. It was the best line of the episode. It was no yum yum or is he shushing you? But what is?
I don't think
It's no AI sausage.
I don't think it's quite my favorite of the episode. But a high contender for me was when Lorca was like, well, you couldn't have done much worse.
That was actually a really funny line. I think Lorca really nailed it this episode. I really, really, really engaged with Lorca as a character. This episode I feel really conflicted on because it has all these spinning plates and stuff, and the writing could be tighter. But unlike the previous episode, the writing wasn't as overtly silly, goofy, and or inadvertently silly and goofy. There was genuinely interesting debates going on in this episode. There was genuinely interesting lines about characters and from characters that give you off the idea of who these characters are. There was lots of ominous but really well done ominous lines about Lorca. And Lorca himself actually got to show off in the episode his own character that has been hyped up by these other characters. In the previous episode we met, he's kind of ominous, he's kind of, he has an evil Nazi science lab, but in this he's having things like, I study war, and all these creepy, scary things, but Jason Isaacs has this demeanor about him that makes it, just on the cusp of being too snidely whiplash evil,
It's
and
the
just on the cusp where I
performance.
could follow him as a leader.
Yeah, it's the performance that makes it.
How do you want to be remembered in history? Alongside the Wright brothers, Elon Musk, Zephyr Cochrane? Or as a failed fungus expert? A selfish little man who put the survival of his own ego before the lives of others.
I always want to see a first-person perspective of one of those crews that got led astray from a rogue leader, a rogue captain. Even if they were justified or not, there's that one episode of TNG in which we kind of get close to it, in which O'Brien's former captain has gone rogue and has started attacking Cardassians. And that episode, you feel for that captain because at the end of the day, you find out that captain was right, but what he was doing was wrong, and O'Brien is conflicted about it because this is someone he respected. I would have loved a whole series
and
of
if he
watching.
was on the crew, he would have followed those orders.
And this season in particular gets close to that, but we'll discuss it as it goes on. I still feel mixed about how I feel about it just being, oh, he was a Mirrorverse captain, and that was the explanation. Yeah. And it was kind of like, but we'll get to that. But you talked about sassy Saru. Saru's not in the episode, but this much. But what is sass. And I wish I could like sassy Saru, but my problem was every single character was sassy in this episode to an annoying degree. Now, it never overrode where I said a single line or single character was sassy in an annoying way, but the sass itself annoyed me because you have a scene with Stamets. You have a scene with Hugh. We'll get to that in the Hugh dial, but you have scenes with Stamets being disrespectfully sassy in front of Saru and in front of Lorca in the engine room about like this thing. He has a whole monologue where he's just being disrespectfully sassy, and
there is no consequence for him being insubordinate ever.
There is, but not in that moment, and it felt uncharacteristic that Saru would not enforce it, let alone Lorca, but Saru standing right there, just letting him be insubordinate. Yet, when we ever meet Saru, what's he doing in the show? Riding Michael's ass about being insubordinate in a lesser degree. And it just drives me up the wall that I know that this doesn't need to be like old Star Trek, but one of the things about old Star Trek that works, and this show does implement at times, but not as frequently, is the regimented nature of these characters. They're in a crew. They're in a star fleet. Even with characters that like one another, you are constantly reminded they're colleagues by the moments in which when someone oversteps the bounds, they get reinforced of don't do that, or you need to back off kind of thing. In this, Paul Stamets is allowed to just be extravagant and rude, and it's good because we like it because it's funny, or we agree with him, or we understand where it's coming from. Yeah. But the authority figures didn't enforce any authority there. They just kind of went, oh, whatever. And I just don't buy it. It just takes me out. And Hugh's being sassy as well. And everyone's being sassy. And there's a part of me that loves sass, don't get me wrong. But there also is a part of me where I go, yeah, but there's a consequence to being sassy. Yeah. And it wasn't enforced in that moment, let alone in other moments in the episode.
Or even in the previous episodes.
No, Lorca was far more harsh about it. He was far more harsh about it. But in this one, Saru and Lorca just stand there and let it happen throughout, and I just didn't buy it.
Sir, being chased by a lethal monster in a death trap surrounded by Klingon bodies is distracting, but no, I would have noticed an extra supercomputer. That's just me.
I want you to take charge of the next conversation, but I just want one nitpick I have. If you have any nitpicks, but I got mine. They abandoned the Shenzhou without self-destructing it?
Yeah, that didn't make sense.
Why would they do that? They're just leaving a valuable flagship of the Starfleet with, as we find out, active information that the Klingons can acquire?
Yeah, we know.
Because we need the Klingons to have a plot device. That's the reason. Yeah. But it makes you just go, oh, if they were so regimented, like, how did Saru not activate the self-destruct? Oh, we need it as a plot device. Yeah. Or someone might say, oh, well, you know, in Star Trek, you can get court-martialed for self-destructing your own ship. Like, Picard got almost that in the past, and you could see that in A Measure of a Man being brought up. But it's just so recklessly silly. In a war, you're just going to leave what is basically a giant weapon and a piece of tech and information just sitting there for the Klingons to get.
In the battle, we see a Starfleet ship self-destruct to just destroy itself and its technology, as well as trying to defend itself.
Yep, it was odd. That's the only nitpick I really have of this episode. The rest of them were just like, you know, annoying little things like stilted dialogue back and forth. Like Tilly and Michael had a scene near the end of the episode, not the final scene that they had together, but a scene a little bit earlier when they're in the with Ripper and whatnot, and it felt like really stiff and fast. It felt really paced weird, and that was, I don't know how to describe it. It just felt like they weren't talking like normal people. It felt edited together. It felt artificial. I don't know what it was, but it just felt weird.
The writing. I have a nitpick.
Nitpick? A nitpick.
Nitpick from that scene, actually, which is really stupid. But okay, so in the show where you see Tilly, you see Tilly on the bed. You can see her trunk at the end of the bed that now has her name on it.
Yeah.
Did she get that put there? Was that there when Michael walked in to her bed? Or did they add it after because now she has a roommate, so now they need to be clear? Or did Tilly stick it there out of spite to be like, this isn't my stuff, this is my side of the room?
Well, to answer one of those things, it definitely was not there when Michael got there, because Michael wouldn't make a mistake on sitting on someone else's bed, because Michael wouldn't make a mistake, except for when she does make mistakes that are drastic.
It's clearly a way of saying, like, this is my side of the room, this has my stuff at the foot of my bed. One thing that I want to discuss is that one of the issues that we have with the show is how quickly they forget that she's a mutineer and they're meant to care about that. And
well, it's because she saved the day in this episode. Now she's getting a new title.
And Tilly says that, and I was just like, oh, okay, so that's -1 point to being a mutineer, and she must just chip away at that so that they're just like, oh, but she's done all of these great things, so it doesn't matter what her history is, because, you know, she also says that in a double way about herself when she's describing the tardigrade, and Landry is just like, he doesn't give a shit about you.
Yeah, she had a good line about that. Yeah, it's just about how he can use you, basically, what you can offer. Not who you are.
Yeah, he cares what you can do for him, not who you are.
What do you think about the tardigrade thing?
Okay, let's talk about the look of it. Because I like the idea that this is something that's evolved, like a similar thing has evolved on Earth, and that somewhere in the universe
this is a big version of it.
There's a macro version of it, and I like that idea because it is a little bit sci-fi in the way that, like, we now know that, like, you know, there's only so many genetic possibilities, and that's why, like, in the world there are like at least 7 people who have pretty much the exact same face as you. So it makes sense that if life was to develop, that there are certain ways that life similar would evolve.
That, and it's not like, you know, it's not like at all they could come up with a brand new alien design, and it's not like old Star Trek where they just had a little puppy and put it in a little unicorn outfit and said it was an alien, basically.
Yep.
A fearful alien. Ooh, a terrifying alien.
Or, you know, put a child in a suit and then dub it with a grown man.
How do you feel about the
look of it?
No,
the design.
No. You're on the aesthetics of the tardigrade. The tardigrade looks fine. It looks mean and cute at the same time.
Yeah, I do not like when we see it in the bright light, but I do think that it looks really cute when it's walking through the mushroom field.
Yeah,
Sweet.
I think more. You're thinking more aesthetics. I'm thinking more literal idea of the tardigrade being this thing that they use to help jump the spores because it has a symbiosis power bond with the spores, and it knows how to. Because the mycelial network is the spores, and so it knows how to.
And it managed to get into the Glen without setting off any alarms because it travelled through the network
into
to the mushrooms, to the storeroom. I like that explanation of, like, where it's come from, because I was worried, like, since I'd forgotten the origins, that it was that he developed it from an actual tardigrade.
Yeah, I
And
forgot to.
He like genetically manipulated it into an actual
Or
thing.
the experiment made a random tardigrade big.
Yeah.
I don't mind the tardigrade storyline as much as other people do, although I will recognize that this whole entire season 1 storyline of Spore Drive Tardigrade and Stamets and all that was taken to court by an independent video game creator where they had the exact same story and plot made before this show came out. That's something to raise. But I think
not an original idea. Though.
it's a possibly stolen idea from a big company, CBS. But my issue is this episode just rushes through the explanation of how to me, I know that they say the lines of dialogue and they rush through the lines of dialogue very quickly. Oh, it's symbiotic power and we hooked up and in its memories it has the map and to the whole solar system and star quadrants. And slow down. This is a big idea you're introducing into your show. This is a huge idea you're introducing into this series, and they just rush through it and we just got to plug it in and it'll work. And it doesn't feel to me that they really give more of a in-depth exploration of how the tardigrade manages to do that. It's more about doing this with the tardigrade is bad. I still don't fully grasp how plugging the tardigrade in makes them travel. I know that the show says it with a bunch of quick-fire lines of dialogue, but I feel like if the whole episode was about that, it would have been more interesting and I would have understood it more. But the tardigrade revelation or thing, it's kind of sidelined because, we got to weaponize it, and then, we know this, and this, and this, and this. It's spinning so many things that I still don't fully, from the actual show, understand how the tardigrade works. I'm sure you could explain it to me and that, but the show didn't do a good enough job for myself.
It doesn't matter either.
It's just magic, basically.
Yeah, it's just magic.
Sci-fi magic.
So it's like, so for you, I know that there are a lot of ways that we can say, well, this would make it better. So if it was the quandary of like figuring out what the tardigrade is, without the time pressure, and that was a storyline, like figuring that out, and maybe Stamets working together, trying to like use his knowledge of his friend to inform it since they've lost the logs. So that like we're getting to know his history and the way that he acts and interacts with it, and maybe some of those walls breaking down between him and Burnham.
And how he approaches scientific endeavors, because we haven't really had a chance to see how he approaches scientific endeavors. We already know that he's halfway through a scientific endeavor and he just needs to get it done, but we don't see how he approaches it from the beginning.
Okay, so that would be like the A plot. And then the B plot would be
Klingons.
Klingons still, but they are having trouble. Like the dilithium thing is the last thing that they need, but they don't have the technology to get over there. So there's they're figuring out. So that like both of the storylines are about exploring new technology and new possibilities. Yes. So that there's a strong theme. And then in the next episode, when Stamets and Michael have already made a bond with the tardigrade, and maybe at the end of the episode they figured it out, but they're like, well, we have to tell Lorca something. But we don't know what this technology will do to the tardigrade.
And again, these are just...
And then the ethical quandary of, like, do they use it? Do they not use it? And
do
then
they agree?
Obviously it's overridden.
Yeah, and again, this is just us fan theorizing and fan writing, and that's... the show presented us what it presented us, and it isn't, like I said, this isn't a bad episode for me. I'm not like Rachel where I'm at the verge of do I hate it or not. I just felt very middle of the road about it. And like I said about the previous episode, more time spent on certain things than others would have greatly benefited this story, this episode's story. But of course, this isn't just an episode. This is a part of a larger narrative. And on the rewatch, knowing where that larger narrative goes, this episode falls more flat than it did initially. And that is an issue that is prevalent, it seems, for the time being. Just because the show has a lot of complex things going on, and we personally would like it if it slowed down, does not mean that we need the show. Yes, but does not mean that we don't want the show to hold our hands. No. We don't want it to condescend. We like complex storytelling, but at the same time, complex storytelling and simple storytelling are far closer to one another than most people like to give credit for.
Your contrite words were insincere.
They were necessary.
I was wrong to question your place on the crew. You will fit in perfectly with Captain Orca.
Is it time for the Hudar?
I think it's time for the Hudar. Hudar alert! Hudar. Rachel, it's the Hudar, the special segment that we have created in which we celebrate the character of Hugh Culber, who is the doctor of the show, a character that we feel we did not get to know very well on our initial watch, a character that we feel we need to pay strict attention to see if he even has an important character and or a character at all.
Important. So we're going to go through moment by moment.
Yep, it was a very intense moment.
So it is very intense. So this approximately at 23 minutes and 32 seconds is our first sight of Hugh.
Yeah, in the fourth episode of the show, we finally meet the doctor of the show. Yes.
Yeah. I do believe that a few seconds before we see his hands.
I think we hear a voice. Even.
Yes. Yes, because his audio comes on slightly before the visuals.
And it's great to see the behind of him before we see the front of him.
Yeah. So would you like to say his first line?
No, you say it. You say it. It's very important that you say it.
Oh, how about you finish it off for me? So, hold still, or you'll wind up looking like...
I didn't write down his lines. You wrote them down. I was writing down other things. So how about you do the lines and I talk about important little details that I found important.
So he has about 4 lines.
He does. He has 4 lines in this whole episode.
But I only wrote 2 of them down. And
very important.
The end of that line, like
a Tellarite.
Hold still, or you'll wind up looking like a
Tellarite. And now the pig people, right? The piggy nose ones, right? They're the Tellarites. I noted down he had 4 lines. Mm-hmm. We saw mainly the back of him for at least 70% of the shots.
Or weird behind profile?
Yes.
Because we are seeing him, so we see his hands first because he's adjusting Stamets's nose because he has severely broken it on his console.
And they have a nice CGI bent nose that they awkwardly Photoshop straight onto the screen, which was very distracting.
It's just like a weird smudge tool effect.
They had to spend that special effects money on the uniform at the beginning, remember?
Mm-hmm.
I noted down that obviously he had medical jargon that means nothing. It doesn't contribute to the plot. It just is medical jargon that is there because it lets you know he's the doctor of the ship, in case you didn't know by his medical uniform and him doing medicine. He has to say the medical jargon, which we all know doctors have to say in TV, because if they don't, their heads implode. That's science. Because I know that because I studied quantum mechanics. I'm Michael Burnham. I know this is a fact. If doctors in TV cannot say medical jargon, their heads literally implode.
That's why you're perfect.
That's why I'm perfect, baby.
Yes, so Stamets, who hit his head on his console,
like a dumbass.
is getting... Yeah, because he's not sitting down wearing a seatbelt. They never have a seatbelt. They have seatbelts in shuttles, but not in the starships.
It's different with shuttles. They're small.
Yeah. The force will affect them more. So, Stamets had a broken nose and also a part of his bone almost lodged in his brain, causing him severe damage to his frontal cortex, which Hugh beautifully explains, and then Stamets is sassy back saying, but yeah, it's only responsible for like memory and emotion.
Yep.
It's overrated, and
They do sass each other.
he says I'll still fix it just in case you want to have an emotion someday.
Ooh, and that's saucy. We know that they're a couple
Yes.
later in the show. Heck, did you write down if anyone said his name in this? I think Lorca comes in and says Dr. Kolber,
Yeah.
but I don't think we find out his first name in this episode.
No, I don't think we do either.
We don't find out that him and Stamets are in a relationship.
No.
You could gather that by how they back and forth banter, but
Yeah,
that's
but
not enough to
also-
actually state anything, because all doctors have a bedside manner and banter in these shows. If I went off of Star Trek Enterprise, how much Phlox as a character has very flirtatious banter, that means he's in a relationship with every single crew member of the ship.
And also, it feels like Hugh doesn't put up with Stamets' shit. So they could just be friends.
Or he could just be the Doctor, where he's
Yeah.
just like, I see a million people who are smartasses each moment of the day. Like Bashir kind of has that dynamic with a lot of people. He's a little bit smartassy to them because he has to see like a
doesn't-
jillion people a day who are like, I'm okay.
Like, it could have come across in a different way, either like with writing or the acting, where it's like an emotional frustration, where it's just like, you are putting yourself in danger and I care about you. Stop being stupid. I don't want to see you die.
Here's the reason why that they didn't do that, though. This isn't an introduction to a character. No. We're being introduced to a thing. Now, I don't mean that in derogatory sense, but in he's not a character in this episode. If you did not watch the whole show, you wouldn't know that he was a big character in this show. They don't even give you his full name. They don't tell you anything about this guy at the very beginning. When other doctors in the show rock up, late into the show, it takes a few episodes for two or three episodes for Bashir to rock up in DS9. Yeah. We're introduced to him from the very beginning of the episode. We get to know who he is and what he's about, what he is, what his role is. Everything about him, pretty much. Same with Dr. Pulaski. Same with the emergency medical hologram, so on and so forth. You get what their characters are about from an introduction from the very beginning. But instead, what episode are we going to have to wait for an actual introduction to Hugh, other than this is his on-screen introduction? But that doesn't actually mean it's a character introduction, because if this was the only episode if this was the only episode you saw, could you tell me that he's a main character or an important character in this show? You couldn't.
No,
you couldn't.
Because he's not.
Because I clocked it. 25% of his screen time is him silently nodding.
Yeah, his second scene is him silently nodding, yes, she
25%
is dead.
of screen time is him silently nodding.
Yeah.
Yet this is not only the doctor of the ship, but also Stamets' partner, who's so important, yet we don't get to know anything about him from our first meeting of him. We have to wait. We've already waited 4 episodes for him to rock up. Now we have to wait. How much longer do we have to wait for us to get a real introduction of this character?
I'm still waiting.
I'm still waiting, but that's the Hugh. Did you like his uniform?
Nah, not really. It goes with the rest of, the suite of uniforms.
It's fine. I don't know. I feel conflicted. I get what they're going for because they're the white medical doctor's outfits, but I kind of miss the old blue,
Yeah.
But everything is blues in this show, so...
Yeah,
you have to differentiate them.
Well, I'll save it. Just in case you might want to have a feeling one day.
So, Rachel, where do you land on this episode? Yum as bad or Yum Yum as good?
It's a yum.
Yeah, I can't give a half yum here. If I could, this would be a yum and a half, but I can't.
No.
I can't. That's against the rules. By the logic of the fact that I had a lot more positive things to say about this episode, I'm going to give it a yum yum.
Yum yum.
It was a good enough for a yum yum from me because it had a lot of things I genuinely liked. Small moments and big moments. If the script was a little tighter, I would be fine with it. I wasn't as annoyed as the previous episode, where that episode seems so obvious to me of how you could tighten this up and fix it.
Yeah.
This one, it doesn't feel as, like, you know, a little tweak here and a little tweak there, and it would have been fine. It would have been better. But that one, it would have annoyed me because it felt like you really focused on the weirdest, like, not on the greatest things here. But that's context is for kings, I guess. Next episode, we'll be talking about, I guess, more Star Trek Discovery. Rachel, are you up for discovering some more Star Trek Discovery?
Oh, yes, and by the point we talk about that, I will probably have forgotten what happened this time.
No! How could you forget? They're at war. Remain Klingonese.
I may need a pop quiz
So,
to re-establish names of secondary characters.
so next episode is the Harry Mudd episode, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe I'm wrong. It's called, yes it is. Season 1, Episode 5, Choose Your Pain. And the synopsis of this is, while on a mission, Lorca is captured by the Klingons and unexpectedly finds himself in the company of prisoner of war Starfleet Lieutenant Ash Tyler and notorious criminal Harry Mudd. Are you excited for the Harry Mudd? That sounds like a resounding yes. Or as we say, yum yum. Now, Rachel, where can the people who listen to this podcast find us on the internet? Is there places they can follow us and see posts and comments and interact with us?
Various social medias. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter at YumYumPod. And come join us on our Reddit as well.
Yep.
The Yum Yum Podcast.
The Yum Yum Podcast on the Reddit. That's all in the information description of this episode. We also are on all the podcatchers. You should follow us, subscribe to us, share us around with your friends, because it's really hard being, you know, a small independent podcast talking about a really niche, underrated, rarely discussed television series, Star Trek. I mean, there's so few Star Trek podcasts, let alone podcasts.
And to start with, there are so few shows that delve into episode by episode breakdowns of shows.
Especially ones like Star Trek.
Like, it just doesn't happen. People are like, nah, that'll never work. I've never seen that happen before.
So make sure...
That's not what podcasts are.
Break that formula. Crack the quantum mechanics and follow us, share us around so that we can, you know, go against the grain of that. We can succeed. Success. Help us. So, Rachel, any wise words of wisdom you want to impart upon us all in our voyage home?
Nah, I'm just as useless as I am ugly.